The year was 1976. Ken was the labor relations manager in a large Midwestern manufacturing company. And one morning, his boss, the president of the division, called him into his office because he was very concerned. He was very concerned and frustrated because the productivity and the performance of the entire manufacturing group had at best been steady and in some cases declining. And it particularly concerned him because the president and the company were getting ready to open 4 new plants at other locations. What Ken was charged with was to take as many people as he needed and find out around the country what are the things that make great companies perform so well, because there were a lot of manufacturing companies performing at higher levels than Ken's company. Ken took 2 people with him, spent 11 months traveling the country, interviewed 27 companies, compiled stacks of data on tables in an office, and went through it and found out and boiled it down to the key elements that were allowing these companies to perform at such high levels. The president of the company took that information and those elements, those key things that made those companies perform so well, and began to implement them in the new startup plants. The first plant started up, and within 12 months, that plant was performing at 200% of the plant that Ken originally worked at. 200% increase in performance and productivity just because they implemented elements that allowed people to create and leaders to create a high-performance work environment. A lot of times we say, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. That might be true in a lot of cases, but I will tell you that creating a high-performance workplace is easy. It's easy. Why don't more leaders do it? Leaders don't do it because they've never been given a really clear roadmap to getting there. How to do it. It's not that they don't want to. It's not that they're not good people. They're great people. We just have to help guide them to a place that's going to create the maximum cultural, high-performing environment possible. It is easy to create a highly profitable work environment where people can absolutely thrive and do the work that needs to be done in a way that shows that they're committed, engaged, and capable employees. We've talked with over 2,300 leaders in the last 11 years. The majority of those leaders will tell us that at least 95% of employees that work in our work environments are great people. They're trustworthy. They want to do the right things. They want the company to do well. Over 95%, most leaders will tell us. Now there's the other 5% that doesn't believe that doesn't want to do that. And the problem we have in a lot of our organizations, and that leaders have, is that we spend time focusing on those 5%. We spend our time trying to lead or corral or deal with the people that are causing us the problems, instead of dealing with the people that are doing the great things and that want to do the great things in our company. And what this does, when we focus on the 5%, leaders have an extremely negative impact on the 95%. It can almost be a dehumanizing impact, because we do things like create policies and rules to control just such a small group of people. What that translates into is compliance. People showing up wanting to do the bare minimum, not because they're not capable of doing more, not because they're bad people. They do the bare minimum because the leaders are so intently focused on the wrong group. What we want our employees to be is committed. We want our employees to want to come to work. Think about that. Do you want employees to want to come to work or have to go to work? The employee that gets up in the morning, dreads it all the way there, puts in their time, dreads it all the way going home, and that cycle starts the next day. That gets us to a level of compliance. So again, because we're focused on these 5%, we create policies. And policies create a two-class citizenship culture. Because policies generally don't apply across the board. People are treated differently based on the work group that they're in. A friend of mine, Brad, a couple years ago, was recently promoted to a supervisor in a warehouse. And Brad relayed to me that he said, you know, the interesting thing is, when I got promoted to supervisor, my boss was very excited about promoting me. He'd been a warehouse employee for years, and boss told him he felt he had the aptitude and the skills and the ability to become a really good supervisor. And when he promoted him, he also gave him a key. Gave him a key that opened toolboxes and opened storage rooms and opened even the front door to the office. And while Brad was happy about that, he said he got to thinking on the way home. It's Thursday. What's different about me today than yesterday? Wasn't I trustworthy enough yesterday to have a key? Why is it now that they think I'm capable of being elevated to a level that I'm going to have a key that's going to open all these things? But that's what leadership does. Without intending to, we set the stage that if you're not at a certain level, you may not be as trustworthy. Part of that stems from the fact that a lot of leaders have what we refer to as negative assumptions about people. In the 1960s, a behavioral psychologist named Douglas McGregor studied this type of behavior. He came up with what's known as Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X, McGregor says that people believe and leaders believe that people in the workplace have to be micromanaged. They have to be watched. They don't want to achieve. They don't want to really do things that are going to help the company. His Theory Y said pretty much the opposite. People do want to achieve. People want to see the company do well. People want to do more. They want to get involved. They want to solve problems. And so for the last 50 years, we've led and managed by these two rather competing or opposing viewpoints of leadership. And we still have that today. So when we manage by Theory X and negative assumptions, we believe, leaders believe, if they have negative assumptions about their employees, that they need to be looked over, they're not going to share information with them, they're going to, in fact, hide information from them, they're not going to give them very challenging work. Well, what about employees having negative views of leadership? Well, when employees have negative views of leadership, employees don't try to get engaged. They may even not worry about showing up on time. They do as little as possible. They might see a problem that needs to be solved, but they don't try to solve it. And when leadership sees that behavior in their employees, it reinforces what leadership originally thought. It reinforces those negative assumptions. And the more those negative assumptions are reinforced, the more employees do the negative behaviors, and the spiral continues to go down. And the opposite happens when leaders have positive assumptions about employees. When leaders believe that employees want to do more, they'll take on challenges, they're capable of doing higher level work, and employees believe the same thing about leadership, that management and leadership want them to be involved in more, they want to do the best they can, the spiral goes the other direction. And it's not the chicken or the egg. Leaders can't say, well, if I just had employees who had more positive views and assumptions and a more positive mindset, I'd lead more that way. It starts with leadership. Leaders have to be the one to set the tone for positive assumptions and the upward spiral. Setting that positive tone starts with something we refer to as adult-to-adult communication. Adult-to-adult communication versus what's traditionally parent-child communication. Adult-to-adult communication means just that. We talk to people like they're adults. We refer to it as treating people or talking to people like a neighbor that you like. But that doesn't always happen in traditional workplaces. In traditional workplaces, we do things like discipline people. Think about some of the words we use: discipline, suspension, probation. All the negative words we use to try to control people. When we communicate that, we're communicating in a traditional parent-child way. What we need to do and what leaders need to do in the workplace is have a conversation with people. And we don't have those conversations enough. It needs to be a problem-solving conversation. Solve the problem and move forward instead of punish you and hope you straighten up. Because again, it goes back to what I said earlier about getting not getting commitment, but getting compliance. So when we treat people like a neighbor that we like, we're more open, we're more honest, we're more trustworthy, and employees will respond in kind. Employees respond to negative behaviors in a negative way. Don was the manager of a delivery service. Don managed 18 delivery trucks. And Don was continuing to have problems with his employees and his drivers continuing to grumble and gripe about the delivery schedules. Some wanted to work weekends, some didn't. Some felt that another person was having to work too many night shifts, and there was all the grumbling going on. And Don would try to change the schedule and give them new schedules, and he just couldn't get past it. And when I asked him why he thought that was, he said, well, I don't know. He said, these people, they'll just find anything to complain about. I said, well, if they're complaining about the schedule, what would happen if you would let them figure out their own schedule? Don was a little bit taken aback. He said, let them figure it out, but that's my job. And besides, if I let them figure it out, we're probably going to end up having shifts that aren't covered that nobody wants to work. I said, Don, just give it a try. If it doesn't work, go back to the way you were doing it. Don gave it a try. He came back, the employees came back, he let them figure it out, and every shift was filled. Every employee got to work the hours they wanted, the days they wanted. They traded off occasionally. It wasn't about treating people the same, which Don was trying to do. It was about being fair with them. And they were fair with each other because he approached them as adults and said, they're adults, they can figure it out. High performance leadership and creating a high performance workplace isn't leading by being manipulative or coercive. It's not about how do I get these people to kind of manipulate them into doing the things I want. That's traditional leadership. High performance leadership is where we truly trust in the skills, the ability, the motives of the people that we have working for us, and then set them free to do the fantastic, great things that they're all capable of.